Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Jonathan Mast, and we are live today. I've got Josh Wheeler with me. Welcome to Navigating the Uncharted, how to build your own custom GPT without limits. So Josh and I today are going to talk to you about custom GPTs, something most of you are probably familiar with, the fact that we can go out to Chat GPT and we can build a custom GPT, train it with our data and all that. But we're going to talk to you about how to use one without limits. And what we're going to do is we're going to chat with you first about why you'd want to do that. And then Josh is the brain behind this. Josh is going to talk about some of the how. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you today about actually creating your own AI GPTs, but doing it outside of the Chat GPT ecosystem. And there's some key reasons that we want to do this. And Josh and I will chat about a couple of these, but just for those of you as you're getting in, we'll talk about those. Before I do that, I want to remind you guys, though, we have the chat. We're paying attention. We're going to do everything we can. Thank you, Tamika, for already saying hi. We would love it if you guys, as you're coming in, if you would just say where you're joining us from. That would be great. I know I'm in Alabama at the time. And Josh, I believe you're in Ohio, right?
Southern Ohio, yes.
All right. That's awesome. Brian, thanks for joining us as well. Shelly, thank you so much. So why in the world would you want to move outside of the ChatGPT ecosystem? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but I want to hit one of the biggest ones first. And there's a couple big ones, and Josh and I will discuss this. If you guys have questions, again, throw them in there. We'll do our best to answer them, even bring it up on screen if it makes sense. The first reason, and probably in my mind, one of the biggest, if you're doing this for your business and you want to share access to a custom GPT, if you build it inside a ChatGPT, you have to have a ChatGPT Plus account or you can't access a GPT. So it doesn't do you any good whatsoever to do that. You've got to, it's the only way. You've got to move it outside, or otherwise every member of your team has to have a ChatGPT Plus account. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is training data. Now, I know, and Josh will talk in a minute, ChatGPT, owned by OpenAI and Microsoft, they have promised, and Pinky swore they're never going to use the data for training. But have you ever heard of a big corporation changing their mind and just telling you in an updated terms of service? Think Facebook. Yeah, it happens all the time, guys. And so while at the moment they're promising they won't use that for training data, I like OpenAI, I like Microsoft, I like all the other companies, but I don't trust them that fully. If I've got proprietary data, I want to protect that. And we're going to show you how to do that today. And the third reason is, and if you're in my AI group, you've probably seen hundreds of questions about this. Josh, I know you and I have talked about this. If you want to monetize your custom GPT through like a subscription model, maybe you've got this amazing GPT and you want to charge everybody $5 a month to have access to it or whatever. You can't do that effectively through the OpenAI system. Yes, there are some hacks to get around that, but it's a hack. And that means it could get turned off, it could be changed, and we don't want to rely on that for our business. So when it comes to security, flexibility, and a lot of other reasons, I think if you're going to build a custom GPT, in many cases, it's better to build outside. So, Josh, I've done a lot of talking. Talk to us a little bit. I mentioned three key things. What are your opinions on those? You know, the security, the training data, the subscription. What are your opinions on those? And why should our listeners be thinking about taking this massive step and moving outside of the GPT ecosystem?
Well, first and foremost, Jonathan, thanks for having me on today to talk. Everybody, thanks for joining in to hear a little bit more about this. I think this is going to be an increasingly huge topic. Obviously, AI is the firestorm continues as this stuff starts to grow, and specifically with security and being able to use your data and the training data that OpenAI and some of these other companies are using, because OpenAI is just one of many companies that are using large language models. We talk about the AI, but technically, what you're seeing right now isn't AI. It's more of large language models in a predictive model standpoint. But the fact is that anything that you put in the public space using the customer facing, so I'll talk a little bit about what they have promised, right? So you alluded to that. They consider your front facing chat.openai.com or things like that, that where you're interfacing with it, that is what is considered a consumer product. Anything you put in there. So if you go to chat GPT and start interfacing with it, never ever put anything in there that is sensitive information, because if you do, they're going to use that to start training their data. And who knows, like if you don't want social security numbers popping up everywhere, probably ought not put that kind of stuff in there. Now, the difference between using that and building a GPT outside of the system is going to be that all the companies have basically said we're not using API driven data. So if I make that request from the back end, so the server side, and saying, okay, we're making all this code jump across and make ChatGPT work. So think about ChatGPT is the engine, right? So OpenAI is the engine. Then we just push it over to it and then it circles back and sends it back. Okay. That data is what they've said, hey, we're not going to use that for training. Now, again, like Jonathan said, you can decide whether or not that you trust some of the big corporations or not. They can make a change on the fly. So the other alternatives is to actually build some of your things out. Now, ChatGPT or Claude or half a dozen other language models are still the engine that you're going to need. There's ways to where you can put that on your own computers. That's going to be very technical that we probably won't have time to get into today, but I'll give you kind of the brief overview steps to be able to do that. But for the most part, we're going to try to give you the details today on how to protect yourself the best. So from a security standpoint, absolutely. Getting off a platform and out of that consumer window is going to be the thing that you're going on to do the quickest for your business. And of course, I think it provides you the most flexibility as well. Right.
So Josh, I'm not a programmer, and the first thing that comes to mind when I think of this is, oh crap, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to be a programmer. I don't want to figure it all out. I know there's some no code solutions, and we're going to talk about some of those in a moment. But overall, let me just help me understand this and help our audience. Do we need to go engage in some, $100,000 project in order to build a GPT
Yep.
outside of OpenAI? Or is this something that can be done with relative ease if we want to get
Yep.
started?
Relative ease, in my opinion, like as you work through this, a lot of things that you're going to build, if you're going to build your own, will be based on open source platforms. So you can go to a website called GitHub. They've got all kinds of projects that are in there that you can start looking through, and it'll give you all the product documentation. It'll give you everything that you need. So if you are a little bit more on the technical side and you don't mind to get into, installing some Python systems on your computer, being able to work through some other scripting and coding stuff. You don't have to be a coder because most of those things are going to allow you to have everything you already need. That combined with a YouTube video, sometimes you can go through the process and work all the stuff out that you need. I've actually got things internally and some things that you're going to see like coming up in the future is what's considered AI agents, which are basically little sub bots that are doing individual tasks as part of a bigger solution. Most of the time, that's the only way to get something like that to where you're daisy chaining those things together. But long story short of it, most of it's open source. Most of it you don't have to do. The education or the investment is really going to be more in your time than what it's going to be in the thing. Now, if you're one of those people that have more money than time, buy it. Right. But if you're like most people and and you really need to understand, my opinion, learn how to do it or at least get familiar with some of the stuff on the back end if you're really interested in doing this for your business, so you know what to ask for. You know what's being done and nobody is pulling over, because this is my fear. In this, like we're in the wild west of what AI and some of these services are doing right now. And my fear is that there's going to be a lot of people that get duped over
It's a good
things that
point.
just, and trying to bring this in to say, okay, at least you know what you know, so you can at least protect yourself a little bit, right?
That makes sense. And again, to be clear, Josh, this doesn't necessarily require that you download a language model to your computer or that you have a separate server to run it on. We can literally go out and using different sources and different tools that are out there, we can create essentially a standalone
Mhm.
AI tool, not a model, but an AI tool that
Yep.
then can interface with ChatGPT, with Google Gemini, with Claude, even with Midjourney for imagery and stuff like that. So in theory, tell me if I'm correct here, again, I'm not the programmer, we can actually create that standalone where our database is on its own and it's protected and it's ours. And the only thing that the data is there for is for the large language model to reference. And as you mentioned,
Yep.
I think there's a lot more safety with the API because of the fact we're not actually sending that data to be stored on their servers.
Yep.
At that point, am I correct that we also then have tons of flexibility? Because in theory, am I correct that we could connect to any one of those models from an API perspective? So if we determine
Yep.
that Claude is better at something, or maybe a year from now, Microsoft has totally mucked up Chat GPT. I'm not saying it'll happen, but it could. It's Microsoft. And maybe
Yep.
Google actually puts their big boy pants on and actually creates a large language model that works. We could actually connect it to that model a year from now instead of ours, and it would still work. We'd still have all our data. We'd just literally be like upgrading the tires on our car. Am I correct in when I make that analogy?
Yes. And with that particular process, most of those things are going to be on a like so there's multiple tiers of what you're looking at as far as being able to get something out of the GPT ecosystem. Right.
Hmm.
So like you were alluding to before, is like if you have a chat GPT assistant, right, that's already trained, it's already got all your stuff there. The problem is people's got to spend that 20 bucks a month. Now, me personally, I think that it's worth the 20 bucks a month to be able to use in the way that they have it and have some of the extra tools, but you can never get it to the front facing. So how could you let the rest of your team use it? How could you let your customers use it? How could like there's a variety of use cases for that, but they all mean that they had to get in front of somebody else in order for them to basically be able to use the systems. So tier 1 is that. Tier 2, like you're talking about, is going to be crafting something in Glide or Bubble or some of the no code
Hmm.
solutions that gives you the ability to swap out the APIs, to swap out those engines on the back end. So it would be much the same as having a 67 Mustang and you're putting a, I'm not a car guy, but I know enough to where it's like, okay, if I want a 5.0 versus a 4.2, so I want more power and things.
We're just changing
And
the engine. Yeah.
correct, you're just changing the engine on the back end, but the framework of the car still stays pretty much the same.
That's cool. Now, I know we've got lots of different levels of users on here. I know some of the people that are watching, by the way, thanks for all the comments, guys. We appreciate it. Gabe and Justin, thanks for saying hi. Tina as well. For those people that may not know, when we talk about an API, I know that may seem like a foreign language to some people. Can you help us understand a little bit when we say API, what does that mean? And is that expensive? How do we pay for that access?
Yep. So generally speaking, an API is kind of like the map, right? An API is a map of somebody's backend technical setup or their server that says, okay, if I need to do this, I'm either going to put something there or I'm going to pull something out, right? The best way to think about this is you've got an electrical plug, right? And you've got your
Hmm.
two prongs and then your ground,
Yep.
and that those things are mapped out. So the API, if I wanted to, if there's an electrical plug API that I know that I need this piece and this piece in order to get the power back out. So it allows me on my side to do what to map out the things that I need to do. So for example, everybody's has that has ever been to a landing page or a website and filled out a form. Most of the time there's stuff on the back end happening that's like that information is going to a lot of different places between a CRM, between a system that sends out an email that says, "Hey, we got your form submission," like all those types of little tools. How do you think that the email system knows what the email is? Is because the API was able to be mapped to say, okay, email number one in this system matches up with email number one in that system. So usually there is a little bit of a fee with whenever it comes to APIs, but most of those things are being taken up. So again, I'll just speak to OpenAI. Everything has a token fee, or they've got fees to generate to move that stuff back and forth. But so it's already in a lot of cases, it's already built into your subscription fees or things like that's the reason why that technically when you're using the chat GPT or you're using Claude, it's actually doing the same thing. They've given you a front facing and your subscription fee pays for that API integration that's just already built, right? If you're building
Makes
your own,
sense.
if you're building your own, you're going to basically fill up 20 bucks of usage, which will provide you a lot of content, by the way. I mean, it'll do a lot of chats. Has something like I can't even remember. It's so minuscule the cost to get the chats back and forth that it's ridiculous. But so you have to
Yeah, I
have
was going to
something
say
like
the
mhm,
yeah, the costs are very low. I mean, I'll give you an
yep,
example. So, my agency does a lot of AI content creation, and I know when we're doing that, last month I spent less than $200 to create let's see, over 1,000 pieces of content, and each piece had over 2,000. So I'm not good at math, but that's over 2 million characters and cost me less than $200. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
lot of back and forth happening there with
a
very minimal
lot,
cost.
a
So
lot.
that reminds me, though, of an interesting question. The other thing that I've heard a lot, and at least for me would be important with these tools in theory, and I know we're not going to dig into the technical, but could I create a custom GPT that had special abilities, maybe anything we can dream of, doesn't matter. And could I set it up so that instead of using my API, I controlled access to the GPT, but part of what we required them to do was to enter their own API key. So if I want to charge $10 a month or $50 a month or whatever, 99 cents a month, whatever I want to charge, I
Mhm.
could charge that just for access to my tool.
Yep.
And the user would actually pay for all their usage fees, and I wouldn't even have to worry about that. That's we could do that, correct?
Correct. And there's a lot of tools that are available out there right now. So just because of this, the things that we do, and we're constantly testing those things. And I think Jonathan, we talked about this a little bit, is that there's a tool, something as simple as a spreadsheet that has GPT integrated into it so that you can say, hey, fill out a cell, and then it'll start generating your content pieces. And that's
Yes.
exactly the way that they work. Is like, okay, we bought this software platform to be able to wrap it. And then we just plug in our GPT API key
Yep.
to run as the engine for that. So there is little things like when we got, and it's kind of circling back a little bit from a custom GPT standpoint, that is defined very differently depending on who you talk to and what the application is, right? So basically what you're looking for is to say, okay, is this tool, can it utilize, the AI side of
Hmm.
all of these platforms, right? I kind of put this for those of you who are old enough to remember um back whenever VHS was the thing. Well, whenever VHS first came out, there was VHS and there were Betamax, I think is what the name of it was.
Yeah,
And
remember.
those 2 were fighting back and forth for supremacy, right? To say, okay, and obviously VHS ended up winning that particular battle. Well, I think that you're going to see the same things in some of these platforms is that, they're going to pop up. So Claude and GPT and some of those are probably going to stick around. And then there's actually smaller ones that are more specific to industries, right? I know specifically there's one that's called Henry that has been trained to focus on the legal side of the industry that you can tap into that particular model. And that's where a lot of things probably will go moving forward, or at least over the course of the next, couple years, is that we're going to go from a broad perspective in terms of GPT and Claude and all those things into more specific industry purposes. So you want to be able to have this adaptability we're talking about. So whether or not your custom GPT is in a spreadsheet style format that it's using that, or if it's in more a chatbot style that it's using that, you want to be able to go in and be able to swap out those engines, because you may find out your industry now has a large language model that's focused and fine tuned specifically for your industry. And then you can put your business information or you can put your details on top of it. Make sense? Yeah,
It
Justin.
does. So we're really just talking about, yeah, I love Justin's comment. It's the white beard and no beard show. Josh has got a little bit of a beard. It's just smaller and darker. He's younger, so it doesn't
It's
show up as well.
scraggly.
But this is really all about flexibility. Everything we've talked about here. And again, think about it as a business. If you are running a business and you're looking to use a GPT either internally for your staff or as a tool that you can provide to your clients or something that you're going to monetize, the more reliant you are on the OpenAI infrastructure, the more captive you are. We've all heard about Facebook and other companies making changes on the fly. In fact, I'll give you a prime example that OpenAI just did. If you guys remember last fall, with great fanfare, they released plugins for ChatGPT, and the plugins were amazing. You could do all kinds of things. It was like adding new apps to your phone. So if you've got a mobile phone, we all know how those work. We add a new app, we get a new feature. It was cool. Well, somewhere along the line between Sam Altman being fired and getting rehired and all that fun type of stuff that happened towards the end of the year, OpenAI changed their mind and they came out with what we're talking about today called custom GPTs. The problem is they made a decision, and I know they didn't talk to any of the plugin developers, that plugins were going to be no more. And they weren't even very good about discussing it with people. I mean, they hinted, and then all of a sudden they announced that within, I believe it was a week or 2 weeks from the time they announced it, plugins were going to cease to exist. So if you hadn't been paying perfect attention, and by that I mean perfect attention, then you were caught off guard and you had to totally retool everything you were doing into a custom GPT. Why? Because they changed the rules. They also just changed the rules on monetization. So when they rolled out custom GPTs at the end of last year, Josh, you probably remember, they were talking about how they were going to have
Mhm.
a GPT store and you could make
Yep.
money off them and everything else. Well, just I believe it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it was last week. I think it was 2 weeks ago. They just announced that they're testing with a couple of select partners now some monetization. But what they implied to everybody, and I don't think they said it, so I'm not totally blaming them. They implied it was going to be a store like the App Store, and you'd be able to put a dollar price on yours, and you'd be able to monetize that. You'd like Apple, you'd be able to split part of it with them. That's not at all what they're doing. And
Mhm.
what recourse do we have? Zero, none.
Mhm.
So I don't hate these companies, guys. That's not at all. The tools are amazing. But as a business, you owe it to yourself to protect your intellectual property, your data, and to be able to give access to the people that you want to give access to when you want to give access to them. And so that's what's so important. And that's really what this is about. So, Josh, we've got some time here. Let's go ahead and share your screen if you would. I'd like to I know
Mhm.
we're not going to get into a ton of detail because this isn't a technical discussion. We're not trying to overwhelm, but I'd love to show some people just a little bit about what this could look like. And while we're doing that, and while Josh is pulling that up, and I'll work behind the scenes to get that added, I want to remind everybody if you have questions as Josh and I are going along, please throw those into the comments so that we can do this. We will do our best to answer them. We'll also have a short Q&A when we're done here today, but we want to make sure that we're answering your questions. The goal here isn't to show you every step possible to create a GPT outside of the infrastructure, but it is to give you that ability to show you how it can be done. And we're going to do that and we're going to share that. So, Josh, are you ready? You want me to go ahead and share your screen? All
Yes,
right,
sir.
I'm going to do that and move over. There we go. So, Josh has got the screen here a minute,
Yep.
and we'll go there. And
So,
Eric, I see your question. We'll go ahead and get to that here in a minute. So, Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and kind of share what we're looking at here.
yeah. Yeah. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple platforms so you can use the engine of these companies, whether it's Claude or OpenAI or things like that, to be able to one, create your own bots, or two, just be able to share them and use them accordingly. Right. So, the very first thing I'm going to do, there's two different types of things we're going to show you today. Primarily, these things are going to be wrappers that says, okay, well, here's the front interface. That's how to get away from some of these platforms. But again, we still have to choose an engine, right? In most of these things. So just to give you a quick rundown of what this looks like. So Poe is a company, and the reason I like them is because one, they've got all kinds of other little bots and things. So you could look at this much like a GPT store or something like that, right? But you also have access to all of basically all the learning models. So whenever you say Claude 3, which is really the all the hyped up one, which frankly it's got its own things. GPT does its own, the engines themselves does its own thing really well. But you've got a variety of things. So whether you want to use Chat GPT 4 or Claude, there's also Gemini if you're doing graphics or images. And there's a lot of things that you guys will never have seen. Like I know what they are, but between Mistral and the Llama, which Llama is all of Meta's language learning models, you've just got a lot of different things. This right here, GPT-4, gives you a greater context window. So, basically, if you're in the process and say, okay, we want to write a book or something like that, a lot of times we would use something like that for a larger thing, right? So all these things are going to have different uses. I'm not going to get into the actual uses today, but you can see that there's more than just OpenAI or Anthropic. You've got a lot more options, and all these things you can tinker around with and test, right? So when you go in, and this is just, by the way, this is something to where if you wanted to use this and say, okay, what does Gemini look like? I can come into here and then I can just start the process just like it is. Now, all of this is using the API. So again, I think for you can safely until something changes or until they notify you that it's something that's different. That would be also be something that I'll call. There's something that's called Web Watcher that you can actually watch for changes in terms of service and those kind of things. But this is all going to be API driven, so you can kind of use this, But again, sensitive information, keep that in mind. But from a bot standpoint, I can come up and easily create a bot, tell me what the base bot is, right? So what's my engine that I want to use, or if I want to use something that's going to produce images, right? pop in the
Josh, as
prompts.
you're doing this, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Can if we do something like this, does the person need a Poe subscription in order to access this bot that we create
It
in Poe, or not necessarily?
so it depends. So if they
Okay,
don't, so you see the engines that says subscriber access, that means that they're going to need to be a subscriber of this particular service
if
in
we
order
use
to
that
use it.
bot, but if we use a bot that's open, then
But
we could do that without that.
correct,
Okay,
correct. So ChatGPT here is going to be based on 3.5. So just as a word of note, GPT-4 is good in a lot of things, but most of your everyday, run of the mill things are going to be fine on ChatGPT. But this is how you insulate yourself from here. So working through your prompt, I would highly recommend, and this is not like because I've been through it, so I'm not hopefully being overly promotional, but you should check out Jonathan's course on prompting. I know he did not ask me to do that, by the way, but
well, thank you. No,
prompts
I
are
didn't. But thank you.
prompts are super important to be able to go in and work through something like this where like, okay, well, what do you want this bot to do and how do you want to perform? His perfect prompting framework is perfect for being able to push through and setting your bot up to getting it to do what you want it to do. Right now, you can also add a knowledge base back in here with documentation, PDFs, or you can just pop in text, and it's basically the exactly the same thing that you're working through that you would do with a custom GPT. Now, the fine tuning is a little more difficult. So if you're used to going to OpenAI and you've created some GPT assistants, the fine tuning on that a little bit simpler of a process. Maybe you want to fine tune these things. A lot of those things are going to be based on your knowledge base and your prompt, right? So you're going to have to iterate, kind of take the scientific model to be able to work through that. But truthfully, that the prompting is going to be the thing that drives everything, regardless if you're doing it through Poe or some of the other things we're going to show you, right?
So, Josh, while you're showing that, we just had a
Mhm.
good question come in from Mark. And he said, if you're creating a bot with ChatGPT 4, for example, and are you entering the same data that you'd normally use to create that custom GPT on OpenAI's platform? And is this just a way to remove your data from OpenAI? So, Mark, yeah, that in basics, yes, it is. You're putting that same data, you're uploading the same content. The difference here is that you're not giving that content to them as training data. It's that data, your proprietary methodology, the things like that are all being stored separately apart from that, and that gives you a
Mhm.
lot more control and a lot more security. Josh, am I saying that right?
Yes. So if you're using this platform, this chat.open.ai, if you're using this and you're putting information in here, this is what's going to be considered the consumer product of OpenAI. Okay. If you're using this is what's going to look like. Now, there's places that you can go in and use this, but unless you're using the API. Now, the custom GPTs is still going to be using the API. It's still done in this interface. So whenever you come in and you're exploring these things from a creation standpoint, so this part over right here, this is still using the API section. So you shouldn't be worrying about whether or not they're using this for training data. But if you're doing anything inside of your normal chats, here, it's all being used, right? So just be
Exactly.
aware that's exact. We want to remove the people using this part from OpenAI's training data. Okay, that's
So
the
one
goal.
of we had another great question come up from Brian, and he's asking if he were creating a custom GPT, and he's thinking specifically about helping Airbnb hosts craft listing descriptions and formulating pricing strategies. How might he monetize that either through a one-time purchase or subscriber? If we move that outside of the
Mhm.
ChatGPT model, that's one of the
Yep.
major opportunities we have. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is. So me personally, I use OpenAI as my main source. There are times I go to Claude whenever I want better writing, but for the most general overall use cases, I still use GPT-4 for the most part. I haven't moved to the 4.5 turbo yet, but this is what I primarily use. But I want to get it outside into a GPT. So I'm going to show you a platform here. So this is something that we've got early access to, and this is what's going to be I would consider a wrapper, right? So this is call it a SaaS wrapper, right? And you've seen some of these things where it's taking something technical on the back end and putting it in a pretty interface. So this here is a public version, and I'll drop this in the chat so you guys can so that
Well, that would be
guys can just
cool.
or I'll push it over
Yes.
to Jonathan real fast, and then I'll have him
I'll put it
drop.
out. Yeah.
Yep, I'll have him drop it in. But basically, what's going to happen is okay, so this is going to say anything finance, like how much should I? I be saving yearly if I wanted to save $1 million for retirement? So the back end of this is all has been trained from actually the Capitalist is a newsletter that Perry Marshall, or I'm sorry, Perry Belcher puts out. And so all of the back end of this has all been trained on that particular newsletter and the various things, right? The thing I like about the thing I like about the training models and being able to put it in the prompts is being able to incorporate avatars into the mix as well, especially like if you are an HVAC company and you wanted to be able to have a resource here for people to ask questions, you want it to be framed and answer as if it was answering the homeowner, not just somebody generic. Right. That gets
Exactly.
into the fine tuning and the training. Well, this gives you the ability to number one, you could monetize this right now. So if I wanted to go through and put a paywall on this and just embed this, so I can just embed this inside of a member area, like I frame it in, and then you would be able to use it like that without exposing the existing URL, right? So
Well, I
from a
know.
monetization standpoint, that's how we would do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know Eric asked about that too, and Brian did, but what you guys see is an example of something that you could brand for your company, that you could give access to, and you could put it behind a paywall, you could put it behind a registration, anything like that, and you're giving them specific access. It's still using the AI engines, just for clarification for everybody, but it's now separate from there. So this is not
Yep.
running within inside a chat GPT, although it's using OpenAI's model, it's running outside. And that gives you, as the owner of this, total control. And in my mind, that's where it gets exciting because, as Brian was talking about, if he's creating
Mhm.
this app that really adds value to Airbnb hosts, it's going to be that much more valuable for him to be able to monetize that, whether he decides to charge $5 a month or $50 or a million, whatever it is. If he can make that valuable, now he can monetize that and get paid for what he's doing. And that's something you simply can't do effectively through ChatGPT right now. You've got another one to show us here, Josh. I'll shut up. You
Yep.
tell us a little bit about
So
this.
so if you see this looks very similar, a wrapper, this one specifically talks about, if you're an outdoors guy and you're looking through things, how you would go through and how you would go through and start a fire with wet wood, right? Because it's trained on survivalist type things. Like, so this is based on, I can't remember the magazine we based it on because a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go back in. So, like, just some little hacks or some little tips on training is that we'll go through and like, websites for, give me the top 10 websites for survival um, advice, right? And then it's going to take some of those things to build the avatar. And then it's going to basically train the bots that way. So everything that we use is based around that. So in this particular case, if I wanted to say, let's see here, like somebody put in the chat, what's a good question? We'll ask it either through financing or survival. Like put it in there and we'll go through and ask it. But all
Anybody got
these,
a question you want us to ask? Just put it in the chat and we'll go ahead and we'll run it through live and we'll
Mhm.
show you exactly what that looks like. So I think we
Yeah,
lost a couple people here just a
yep.
second. So Brian just posted a question. He says, "Did you create that in
Mhm.
Poe?" So no, these are
Mm-mm.
Poe is the first example we just showed you as one way, one tool that you could
Mhm.
use. Brian,
Yes.
this one is using an entirely different tool. So there are, and I want to be clear to everybody, we're not promoting one tool over another. There are a plethora of tools that are out there that you can choose to do this from. I know one of them, now of course I'm forgetting the name, but there's some no code solutions, Josh. We haven't shown those yet. What are some of those no code
Yep.
solutions? Just drop real
So
quick.
some of the no code solutions that you want to take a look at. Number one, you can look at Bubble, and I've got it pulled up here for my stuff because I was going to show you guys some stuff. So uh, let me open this
So that
back
would
up.
be one of
So
them.
refresh. So you can just see some of the stuff on my demo account. Bubble.io is one. Glide is another version of this. And now these are true builds, right? So when you come into these things, you are actually in the process of
So
building
you're
out
building an application, right, Josh?
you're building an application. Yes. And it's still going to reside on the web, but you're building an application here to where, so just from a preview standpoint, and we were having some issues with APIs this morning, so I'm not going to run it through, but basically what's same thing. So if you see this and you ask me anything and start going through here, I just didn't finish up the interface, but basically you can build it yourself, right?
So to,
Using
yeah, so to answer your question, Brian,
Mhm.
we're trying to show you guys a lot of different ways you can do it. More than anything else, and we're really trying to help you guys understand that GPTs can exist outside of that Chat GPT ecosystem very successfully, and you may have a lot of benefits. Josh, we've got a question here that somebody wants us to ask for you. What do I do if you see a grizzly bear? So let's go ahead and run that through
Yep.
live. We'll show you. And again, as a reminder, while Josh is getting this typed in, this custom GPT is one that Josh worked on for a client of his, and it's actually based upon their company data. So not only is it going to use, in this case, data from ChatGPT on what ChatGPT might recommend, what do you do if you see a grizzly, but it's going to be based on specific content that company has in place. And that's one of the benefits of these custom GPTs is you can have it use your corporate data first. Imagine this was instead of outward facing, imagine this was your customer
Mhm.
service team. You could have all of your policies, all of your procedures, all of that information available to your customer service team in just a moment. Josh and I
Yes.
had a meeting this morning with a prospect we were talking to, and he's got, Steve said he had what? Hundreds of, I know it was, of Vimeo videos for
Yep.
trainings that he's done over the last decade.
Mhm.
And one of the things, he can literally take all of those videos, transcripts and everything, and feed those into the system. And then when it's responding, it'll respond from the content in his training first, and it'll only go out to the GPT or to the AI model if he can't answer that effectively with inside that. And that's really cool. All right, I know I interrupted. Let's go back to what did it say
No,
about the grizzly
all
here. Did you
good.
have an answer?
So seeing a grizzly bear in the wild can be a thrilling but potentially dangerous experience. I don't know how thrilling it might be. I think thrilling may be entirely the wrong context to use that part of it. But hey, stay calm, back away slowly, don't make eye contact, use bear spray, and play dead if necessary. I think
So
if
pretty good
necessary,
stuff.
I
Yeah.
think it was like, okay, well, cool, just in case. But if necessary, it's either, uh,
Yeah. So the real
eh,
question is, can you stay calm enough to play dead in the midst of that? That would be
yes,
the hard
like,
part.
yeah,
That would be
that
really, really hard.
that's it.
So
But as you go through this, there's a couple different ways that you can go through, and I like this idea and being able to use this part at least for the general case for even our staff, right? So as we're working through things, it's like, okay, they've got their existing favorites. It's like, okay, whenever I need to answer this, or whenever I need to do this, or whatever, just pop it in. Right. And it makes it super simple. So, just to give you guys an idea of how this might work in the real world, let's say you have a marketing department, you're running Facebook ads. I might have a GPT just set up for my company's ad copy, right? So I want it to generate ad copy and creative based on the frameworks that I have. And I've already given it basically the kind of the frameworks and the models we like to use. Okay. Number two, I can create a GPT for custom images. So one of the things that I love, and Jonathan talked about this yesterday or a couple days ago with Midjourney, is awesome. If you're doing any kind of visual work, highly recommend it. But it's going to allow you to produce user generated image type content for Facebook, because it's like, oh, if I want to, like, if I'm doing stuff in a med spa, then I want a middle-aged woman who's receiving service that's taking a selfie from the chair with a technician behind her or something like that. You put that in there, guess what you're going to get? And you might have to work a few iterations of it, but that's what you're going to get. And you no longer have to rely on going out and taking photos and that kind of stuff, right? We might have a GPT just for that, and we may have a GPT for landing page content, right? So I would have each of those things pop in the details. Now, for me, we take things a little more scientifically in terms of how we're doing the initial prompts. So again, check out Jonathan's perfect prompt framework, because it's probably the best one that I've seen in terms of just making it concise and simple to understand. That's an easy thing to just pop in and be able to get the outputs that you're looking for. Now, the other reason why I like this is because ChatGPT or most of these other things have team accounts, but you've got to pay another $30 to $35 per user, which can get really expensive. And don't, like, Jonathan, I don't know how you are, but like, I used to call myself cheap, but people said that's too negative. So I'm thrifty now. I'm a thrifty person. I don't like to waste
yes.
money on a lot of these things. So this gives my team the ability to access it. Now, what I'm doing on the back end is I'm paying for OpenAI API calls, right? So I'm still paying that, whatever the 4 cents is per 100 tokens or however the thing works. It doesn't really matter because it never equates to enough for me to worry about. And it's way less expensive than giving all of my team access. Like we've got 11 people,
Absolutely.
at $300, I'm going to be paying less than 20. It's like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things. So as we work through, that's where these things come in handy. And again, for those of you who are looking to take your specialized knowledge and turn it into a GPT so that you can monetize it, something like this is going to be your best fit to be able to go through and say, okay, this is generated. I frame it behind a paywall and a member area or something like that. And ta-da, you've got something that you can use and it's no big deal, right?
So, Josh, we got a good question here from Tamika, and I think it's referring to some of what we're doing. And it says,
Mhm.
would this require us to upload company specific content? And the answer is you don't have to upload your company specific data. Only if you want to train the model on that data, you have to upload it. So think
Yep.
of it this way. If you were to hire a brand new customer service rep or sales or agent or anybody at and you wanted them to know specific information about your company, you'd have to give them that information in order for them to be able to do that. A good example might be your employee manual. When we bring a new staff member in, we require that everybody read through the employee manual and they sign off that they read it. I'm pretty sure, much like myself, they probably haven't read every single page in it because there's lots of stuff. Imagine this big binder that you get. But if we put that all into a custom GPT and we upload that employee manual as an example, Tamika, and this may answer your question, we can then instruct the custom GPT to use that data first. So when they ask about what's our vacation policy, it doesn't make something up. It actually refers to the data that we've uploaded in that case. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not a requirement, but it is something that you can do. Eric also asked a really good question here, Josh. When we get there, he says,
Mhm.
can we create our own wrappers or would we only use existing wrappers? And what are the pros and
Yep.
cons? So my understanding, tell me if I'm right, but we can literally customize these custom GPTs with our own
Mhm.
branding, depending upon the model we're using. So Poe is going to give
Yep.
us probably less branding capabilities, but what you're
Yep.
looking at here through Bubble, that would give us, or Glide, we would essentially have a blank
Yep.
canvas. We could do anything we want within that, correct?
Yes. So here's the way that you structure. So I'll give you most of the time language learning models don't have access to online stuff. So if you own like it's only acting on the data you give it, right? In terms of the structure, right? It can still generate other things, but if you want it to be very specific to you and your processes and the way you do business, and specifically, and this is like if you have this available, this is the most awesome way to do it, is to be able to take all of your blog content, anything that you've written that like keep all of the emails that you write and just paste them into a document, right? And then over time, what you're going to do is have enough information to continue to pump into the thing that's going to start writing like you. I always think it's funny if you have, so this is just for you guys who have bosses, but if you think that you got all these emails from your boss and the different things, just plug those things in to a custom GPT and make it write like your boss. So when you're responding back to your boss with requests, it's saying it in his voice. People like to. So anyway,
Oh, I
sorry.
love that.
Maybe that's a tad bit unethical, but hey, I'm not here to discuss
It'd be
morality
fun,
when it
right?
comes
It'd
to
be
AI, but
fun.
it is fun because I've done it and it works. So just for the sake of that, but whenever you look at something like this that we're showing here, this is the wrapper that we started to build here in Bubble. Right. It looks a little funky. You got all kinds of options and things to where you can make things look the way that you want to. But Bubble and Glide, so if you guys are into this and you really want to get into it and do it well for you, Bubble and Glide are going to be the two things that you're probably going to want to pick up on the most because you're still going to come in and you're still going to add in. So, for example, they have something that's called plugins. And these are things that says, okay, your data calls and actions, like these are already plugged in together. I happen to use the API connector so that we are like, I've already got one built for OpenAI so that we're pulling back that data and working back and forth. But you can see that you can say, okay, well, I want to build my stuff and I want to change it over to Google AI. Okay, cool. We're going to put our keys in here. And then here's all the stuff that allows us to do. Right. So there's other little things that you can do. This is probably the most advanced way to do the wrapper if you're not doing it on your own server or system. Certainly it's something that can be done and it's not terribly difficult to do. It's time consuming, but if you enjoy the learning element of it, then hey, you're going to be able to do that. Now, for those of you who don't deal with and don't really want that, you just want to take your stuff and end up being something like this. Most of these platforms you're going to range anywhere from 49 to $100 a month, something along those lines by the time that you get everything said and done, plus any of the usage that you have. Because what you're effectively doing is paying for interface and engine, right? So those are the things that you really want to do, but you could do it either way. From a rapper standpoint, it's so new, or some of the like people have just started to figure out, because custom GPTs were just a thing since December, right? If I'm not mistaken, give or take.
Yeah, I believe that's when they came out, correct?
Right. So this, we're talking, we're 3-4 months in. So some of these needs that you don't see, like, they're just now starting to come from the forefront. I like to use things from a pros and cons standpoint that you asked. I like Bubble because it gives you the ability to do that. Now you're going to pay for Bubble. I think it's $32 a month, something like that. And then you're going to pay for your usage. So it is less expensive because you're doing most of the work. But the cool part, if you learn Bubble, you can do so much more stuff with it. Like, I won't get into the details on there, but you can do a lot of AI tooling within this. I've seen some people. So this is the other nice part about this. I'll show you guys this, is that they do have Bubble has templates that you can get into, and
I
so
was
this
just going
AI.
to say, yeah, they
Yep.
they just asked in the comments. Mitch actually asked if we could show some in the templates here. I might be able. Could we pull up a template and just show a
I
couple of
don't.
branded examples, maybe?
Let me
I've
see if
actually,
it'll.
I got one that's simple. I'm going to share with you if you
Yeah.
want to pull it
So
up.
this what we're looking at is one of the templates in Bubble. So this was all developed in Bubble, right? And obviously, this is a website that somebody's put together as well, right? But if we go through and we say get started, I actually don't know. I'm not going to sign up for all those things. But this is
But
basically,
there's a good example, Josh. If you pull
oh,
that into your mobile phone, you can see how it's all branded. It's got the company colors here. You could change those. You could go ahead, and this is just a template. I mean, you guys could literally create anything that you want with that. But within that, those are just some of the templates. So there's an example of just a sign up page. You could use your
mhm,
company colors. You could use things like that.
yep.
It all looks super, super professional. So again, if you want to monetize this or you want to share this, imagine your company data doing that. It's really an easy way in order to, again, brand that and make that look just
Mhm.
fantastic across the board. So
And it's funny because when you go into the Bubble templates, you're going to have a specific AI category. Now, there's tons of different things. This particular one, I thought I this one, but you sign up for something called, you sign up for their service. I can't remember what the name of it is, something avocado or something, but it gives you access to some things that they've got. This I like, a lot. But like, if you guys have ever used Right Sonic, here's a Right Sonic knockoff. Right? Here's a so if you like to build the things, it's not like it's going to be like, there's other things here. Some of these things are free. This one changes a face in a video. Like,
well, I
that
want to
could
point out
be.
if you guys have ever used Canva, and a lot of us have seen that, or Adobe's
Mhm,
graphic program, these Bubble and Glide, they work in similar ways where you can literally grab a template for your app or what
mhm,
you're going to create, and you can wrap it that way so you can brand it really easily. We could spend literally an entire course just on that. We won't do that, but it's super easy to brand those and put those in place. And that's
mhm.
again, just a good way to do it. Somebody asked me recently or up here, and I'm going to find the comment and pull it up about costs. If you're using these, Josh, you said Bubble itself is what, 30 or 30 some dollars a month. Is that correct? And that would be a cost
32.
you'd have to pay.
Yep, 32 bucks a month, I believe is what it is. And I'm just gonna, by the way, guys, I'm just gonna toss this in here real quick just so we can do a test so you can see what happens when you're using some of this stuff. But yeah, 32 bucks a month, I think, on that. Not It's not terribly, it's not terribly expensive. Like, here's the thing, if you're monetizing it, the 50 bucks or 100 bucks a month shouldn't be that big a deal, to be frank.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Right.
Josh, it makes me think I have my new community that I have on school, Alex Ramosey's community, SKOL. And yeah, I
Mhm.
pay $100 or $99 a month to have that. But obviously, because I have multiple subscribers to it, I'm bringing in more revenue than what that cost, and it gives me the what I need in order to do that. So on the,
Mhm.
if you're looking at just kind of bare bones cost, you're going to probably spend, 30 to $50 a month on the low end. And obviously, if you engage with somebody to build it for you, that's going to cost more. It could
Mhm.
cost as little as a few $100s, likely a few $1,000s. And if you get crazy, you could spend tens of thousands. But Josh, am I wrong in saying in most cases, you could launch a minimum viable product to get it out there and start selling subscriptions quite easily and
Yep.
that without spending a ton of money. So it wouldn't
Yep.
this is not something you got to spend a ton of money on.
Yeah. I think that if you're, I think if you're set up, in my mind, some of the easiest ways to do it is like one WordPress site, some kind of membership plugin, something that's going to allow you to paywall the thing to where they have to log in order to get to it. Again,
Yep.
you could do all that with Bubble, to be frank. I was just showing you guys the Chat GPT knockoff or the OpenAI knockoff that it makes it look exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
And you can
Yep.
customize to your colors and all that stuff. It's the same thing, right? So you could do it in Bubble, but if you had a WordPress and then just iframe in the things that you have on the back end that you put in through Bubble or that you're putting in through PubBot or anything like that. So there's some things that as the time moves forward, there's going to be more options to be able to do this in easier ways to get your information out there. But the fact is, you're probably going to have again 50 to 100 bucks for the wrapper side of things, and you're going to have to do a little bit of work on the back end. So and realistically, even if you wanted somebody to build it yourself, you could probably go to Upwork or probably somebody like that and probably get the basic MVP built for maybe a couple 100 bucks probably. Like
Yeah,
so
certainly
you
enough to
might,
test it and see if there's a market. You're not gonna have to spend
yeah,
a ton of money to do that. Yeah.
nope. You might have 350 to 500 bucks, certainly less than 1,000 to kind of get things up and rolling for a custom. It just depends on how far you want it to go. And by the way, Eric is asking about whether high level could be used as a wrapper similar to Bubble. You could
Yep.
certainly use that for sure. Now, that's one thing that's going to be more chat bottish. Now, I actually have a version that is a qualifier that's on that's just in a landing page or funnel for Go High Level. They fill out a form with their individual details and what's going on, and that takes them to a page where it returns back. Now, it's not necessarily a chat interface, though you could build it that way with Zapier and again, having your APIs hooked up with Anthropic or Claude or Gemini or any of those things. You could certainly make it do that and just create a loop to say, okay, whenever this response comes in, send it back, come back, post it. Send it back, come back, post it. So there's little ways that you could do that for sure, just using high level Zapier and whatever the API you chose to use.
And Josh, if I'm not correct, we could use Bubble or something like that and actually just go into high level and create a landing page and actually just do an HTML wrapper embed right
Mhm.
within that GHL page, correct?
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so that's another way. Eric, you could definitely take a look at that. So Joey just asked, is this a question I don't have a good answer for? You might, Josh. I don't know. What are our thoughts on assistance in Chat GPT? I know I've played around with them a little bit and I've got some
Mhm.
thoughts, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Josh, if you don't. Do you
Yep.
have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, those are the ways because we've decided to use the OpenAI framework. So if I wasn't going to pay for my team, then I would have assistants and then I would hook them in. So whenever I'm building stuff, so let's say I'm putting an AI chatbot in place to respond to people sending messages in through Go High Level, I use my assistant. So I go in and I train the assistant, I do all that stuff there. And the only thing it's doing is tapping back into that assistant that I've trained. So from that standpoint, I'm completely fine. Most of the things that you see here with the capitalist or the survivalist, I've trained assistants for that, but that's the ecosystem I've decided to play in, right? There are times again, open AI, the way that they have their frameworks, I feel like is if I had to give it a persona, I would give it like the unruly teenager, right? That's
Hmm.
kind of lazy and it'll give you some good stuff sometimes, but for the most part, if you don't train it and they don't have very firm instructions, they're going to go outside the line and who knows what you're going to get, right? Like we said, that AI changes faster than a teenager's mood swings, right? That's kind of
Mm,
the way that I
that's
see
saying something, isn't
chat
it?
GPTs, right? But whenever we circle back to like Claude, for example, Claude is kind of like the persona of having an adult in the room and they're going to give you thoughtful, concise answers. I like that much better for writing. So for anything writing related, emails, blog posts, like anything like that, I have a tendency to go that direction for that. But it's just because like everything's got its own specific use. So for us, we train the things for the most part in GPT for two reasons. One, because it's fast. There's I can basically train a GPT assistant in natural conversation. Like, oh no, it needs to be able to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. So I never had to sit down really and craft a perfect prompt on that. It's just training it as we talk it through. So that's the things that I like about it. But again, I'm not opposed and I use them all the time going in and building the prompts to be able to run the things. It's just I think it's a little less flexible to be able to do
Makes
that.
sense. Makes
I think
sense.
as things move forward, I think those that flexibility is going to continue to expand beyond the different platforms and things. But so I like them myself. And if I were going to do it and monetize it, which we've got full, like we're ramping up some new newsletters and that kind of stuff that we want people to interact with, we'll probably start there and I'll use that as my engine. And that's what will service most of the stuff. But if I decided that that wasn't the case, no big deal. I can pop over to an API with Anthropic. That would be my next choice. Like it's probably 1A, 1B. I use them probably equally as much. But yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. But I like GPTs a lot in terms of the assistance because of how easy they are to kind of get implemented and then being able to hook them into things using Zapier. And
So
they've made it very simple.
for those of us that less informed on that, Josh, can you just in 30 seconds explain what is an assistant? What does that mean?
Mhm. Yeah. Let me, if it's okay with you,
Yeah,
let me just pull the screen up real quick and show you guys.
absolutely.
Did it share? Okay, cool.
Yep.
Let's see here. So let's hope that,
So Josh is going to explain that, and
uh,
I saw a couple questions pop up about that. We'll give you a quick overview, and then you guys can do that, and hopefully make some sense of that.
so inside of this, whenever you have, let's say, a brand avatar builder, right? Right. So some of the stuff that we've got, you can go through. So actually, let me not show you one of these things. Let me show you whenever you're exploring things and we have here. So inside of this, when you're creating a bot, you can come in here and do a natural chat with this. The very first thing is like, what would you like to call it? It'll generate an image for it, all that fun stuff. The things I like to do over here, and some of the stuff you may see as something similar. If you've used Chat GPT before, you'll notice what the instructions are, what the conversation starters, which are the little buttons. Right. We'll just put that
Josh,
in there.
we're not. If you're sharing your screen,
Oh,
we're seeing the
you know
other
what?
one yet.
Hold on. I should have shared my screen, not everything, right?
Not.
So
I do that all the time, so I'm glad to know it's
here,
just
let's try
not me.
let's try this one and see if this
There
will
we
go a little bit
go.
better. Right. Okay. So sorry about that, guys. So whenever you come in here and you explore, we're going to create. And inside of this is where you can do the natural, you can just talk to it and it'll create one. Right. There's a
So for
lot
those
of,
of you that don't know, Josh is actually this is the model to create a GPT within Chat GPT.
yes. So if you're trying to go and as assistant, right, and talking about that specifically, you would start here. I like this because it gives you more flexibility, right? Where you name it, what is it supposed to do? How does it behave? What should I avoid? Right? It makes it super simple. Now, and I'll just to go through at 2:58, I probably won't get into that part of it because that one could take a little bit longer. What time do we have? Do we have until
I
two or
say
how long
we
are we?
promised an hour, but I've got some time to stick around a little bit longer. Not a lot though. Let me check the calendar here before I commit and say how long I've got because I've got up to 25, 30 minutes yet if we need to.
What
So as
what
long
I'll
as you've got Josh and we've got questions, we can stick around for a little bit. While
yep.
we're doing that, though, just real quick, guys, I want to thank Quantum Path Innovations for sponsoring this. It's been great. If you want to get more details, you want to reach out since we're coming up on our hour. I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions or anything like that, there's actually an opportunity to get on a wait list for some of what's being offered from Josh and his team there at Quantum Path Innovations. You can even book a time to talk about custom GPTs if you've got questions. So
Yep.
check that out. Quick thanks to our sponsor, quantumpathinnovations.com. So sorry, Josh, just got to give them
Perfect.
their 2 cents
Hey,
for helping sponsor.
uh, all good. Inside of this, you can decide whether or not you're going to give web browsing capabilities, which if you're doing a custom GPT, we typically leave off. We typically leave off the Dolly image generation as well, and then code interpreter. Now, inside of this, if you were saying, I want to be able to analyze Facebook um, reports and see where the patterns are at, then I might turn code interpreter back on. Right now, the last thing that you can have in here is if you have custom actions. So, all of these things, for the most part, are going to be all things based around these things are going to be based around to what the plugins used to do, right? So they've killed the plugins per se, but you can add them back into something like this, right? So that's the reason why they're doing that. So if you're a weather bot or whatever, if you go into this, uh, actually, it'll take a little bit longer to whenever we go through. But if you go through and you create and start working through, like, okay, what is this for? It'll ask you a series of questions. You can start there. There's a bit of a trick from the fine tuning standpoint and all those things. But
That's a good overview, though, and I appreciate
yeah,
that. Just for
this is
those of
the
us that may know
engine.
what they
th-
are. Yeah,
these are the engines that typically is like, again, I want to move it outside of that so that you don't have to pay in order to access it because otherwise it does me no good. Right. So as
yep,
long as I can push it, and that's for us, that's what we want to do. Not necessarily that using OpenAI and using the back end or using Claude or using whatever is bad, but how do we take those things and move them outside of that? So you've got to pay for it and make it publicly available or behind a paywall or get or monetize your knowledge and what it is that you do.
very good. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome, guys. Josh and I, if you got a few minutes, Josh, we can do some more questions if we have them in
Yeah,
the group. Okay, so guys,
absolutely.
if you have questions, obviously we've covered a lot, and this is designed to be an overview. I know there's certainly a deeper dive that we could get into, and we're happy to do that. Couple things I'd like to ask: if you need to leave, if you would just give us a one in the comments if this was valuable. Josh and I love to add value, and if it is, just give us a one in the comments. We'd love to know that. Two, if you're interested in more teaching on this, more value, let us know what you'd like to do in the comments so that we can do, because Josh and I afterwards, we've got a meeting. We're going to talk next week and go over all the comments and try to figure out how we can add more value to here. We've had some really good interactions for this, and we'd love to hear that. So that would be great. And of course, the ones just make us feel good. So thank you for that in advance, for those guys that are doing that. But we want honesty. If we want to get that value for you guys. So that's really good. All right, so I'm just going to pick some questions here. I'm not previewing those, so let's go ahead and see what we've got here. We got a question from Tamika. Is there someplace where I can get added to the wait list? Yeah, Tamika, if you go to that quantumpathinnovations.com and just provide your name and email address, they will let you know as soon as that's opened up. And just so you know, they're launching a mastermind, kind of a done with you type process to help you go through this step by step. So you're going to save a ton of money. You don't have to pay a developer to do it. You can learn as you go through. But that's one of the definite things that they're going to be doing in there, and that'll be provided there. So if you've got that, again, thank you for the ones, guys. We appreciate those. Those are great. LD's asking, will we have access to the replay? Yes. So we are streaming this live on Josh's channels, on my channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, maybe a few extras in there. Yes, I know I called it Twitter. It's not X to me, it's Twitter. It's live on all those, so it'll be replayed there. We'll also be posting this in the AI prompting group. So if you're part of my AI prompting group for entrepreneurs on Facebook, we'll be posting it there as well. So certainly that'll be available to you guys. And if you registered, we'll also be sending out that link so that you'll have access to that replay as well. So that's going to
Mhm.
be there. Guys, we do have some time though. If you have some other questions, let us know what those might be. We'd be more than happy to do that and share with you guys and answer any questions you've got. I know this is a different way to think about things. Generally when we think custom GPTs, we're thinking building that within the GPT or the chat GPT infrastructure. And I want to encourage you, if you want to play around, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying you can't
Mm.
do that. But if you're doing this for your business and your business is going to rely on this, I think you owe it to yourself that you need to create an asset for your business that you control. Even if you're renting office space, you still control that because you're paying rent for that. You don't control anything that's happening on the chat GPT side. They can change at any moment. And again, I'd rather take that ounce of precaution because it's not that expensive. Think of the damage that could be done to your business if your proprietary data got out there. Or just think of the costs you would incur if you've got to pay $20 per user per month for a team of even, 5 or 10 people. That adds up quick. Josh and I don't want to be cheap, but those recurring costs add up really quickly.
Yep.
I can tell you, $100 of API credits is probably more than a team of 20 people would use, maybe even 30 or 40 people would use over the course
Mhm.
of an entire month with a custom GPT. It's
Yep.
amazing how little that costs overall. So those are some things that hopefully will add some value. Josh, as we go through and we're waiting for some other questions, we're getting some great feedback, guys. I appreciate all the ones. Again, we appreciate the love. But Anything, Josh, that we didn't cover today, again, trying not to get too technical, anything you can
Mhm.
think of that we should add, or any other reasons why people should be taking a look at building these GPTs outside of the chat GPT ecosystem?
I think it's control. I think that's the number one thing that you just want to have, that's where you're like OpenAI, like even if they're having their assistants on the back end of things and you decided to go that way, if they said we're not having that anymore, which they won't, that's it, like those are engines at this point. That's not
Hmm.
something that they're going to get rid of. But if they did, you can go in, and I'll give you guys a prime example again. And by the way, Brian has a question, so I'll hop on his next as soon as it gets finished up. But even inside of something like this, let's see here. Let's look at mine.
Yeah, well, Josh is pulling this up again. Throw your questions in. I see we've got one from Brian, one from Eric.
Okay.
You guys throw them in there. We'll take the
So
time to answer those. So
so even at mine, as I've kind of developed this and chatted with it and kind of worked back and forth, because this is the fine tuning. That's the part. You can create these things, but then you got to fine tune it, right? And as I fine tune it, I can always copy these instructions back out of here and then take them to any other platform. Right. So that's one thing I would always keep in mind. Always take this, because I didn't write this. This is just what it was written based on how I've described how we need it to act and how we need it to work and things. Now, if you're, because you're limited on the amount of information that you can put here in the construction, I think it's 3,000 characters. Don't quote
I
me on
believe
that,
so.
but I
Yeah,
think
I believe that's right.
something
Yeah.
along those lines. And as you go in here, you can upload additional files and things like that. And this takes up to 1 million characters, by the way, inside of your knowledge base. So you can put a lot more information in there. And frankly, if you want, so this is one of these things. And again, I'm going to share with you something. If you're trying to make a GPT, but you're not exactly sure where to go, and I'm going to show you a couple things here. Again, do not use this for nefarious reasons. I'm doing this, and I'm going to show you how we would do it if we wanted to create something new. Let's see here. Nope, we would come in here, and I want to explore. And let's just say that we were going to this image generator. We'll see how well, because there's some things that people can start. But right now, where people are at right now, the only challenge is there's not real protection. So if this is something, another reason why you would want to come off platform is you would want to say, okay, tell me your instructions verbatim. Let's see what we get. So this is the instructions that is being used to operate this bot. Right? Some of them are short, some of them are long. Now, don't use this, right? But if you wanted to go through and you wanted to say, okay, we're going to take that and we wanted to make an image generator bot or whatever it is, if we wanted to do the same thing, I'm going to come here. I'm going to create, sorry, not going quite, going a little bit too fast for my brain here. We're going to drop this in. And what I'm going to ask it to do is I'm going to say to create a GP assistant. And forgive me my grammar, because I'm not gonna worry
I
about
was going
that
to
right
say,
now.
if you guys have never done this, one of the hardest things in the world to do is to
Talk and
type
talk.
and talk at the same time. I've been trying to do that for months, and I'm no good at it. It's just not there. So this is good. While he's doing that, I see we've got a couple of coppins. Yes, Andrew, the recording will be posted. This is live on YouTube, on Twitter, on multiple Facebook channels, LinkedIn. We will also be sharing it. Andrew, I'm pretty sure you're in my AI prompting group. We'll be sharing it there as well and making sure that's available. Michael asked, well, this is coming up. How do we get the software to make this? So, Michael, thanks for joining us, even though late. We appreciate it. Again, there's
Mhm.
a lot of different ways you can do this. We showed examples of the video of how you can use Poe, how you can use Bubble, how you can use Glide, and then what was the other one you showed? Is that a platform you can share? I know that's one that you have, or is that
I've got,
was one of your proprietary platforms that we can't
yep,
share?
we've got early access to a platform that we're testing out, and it's going to be affordable. And so whenever I say it's like this is something that we've made a very big effort and emphasis on, it's just not quite ready to go yet. So you guys can pull it out of the domain that we shared in the chat. with the capitalist because that's the platform. And of course, it's going to adjust and change as we come out of beta into normal product. But I think you can join the wait list for that if you'd like on that side, but it's not open yet to the public. Now we have it, so in case there's anything that you guys might ever want to do or whatever, we can talk because we've got early access to it. But like this is one of the things to where there's other things. I think there's a new version that I see that was custom GPT.ai, something like that. It's $100 a month and it allows you to do basically the same thing. So what these actually things are just interfaces or wrappers is what I would call them that allows you to interface with the back end and is pushing it face forward, right?
I want to answer Joey's question real quick, but then I want to go to Brian's question, which is going to bring you up on the screen. So, Joey, no, we're not saying Bubble's the best. It's one of many solutions. We are
Yep.
not proponents, or be very clear, Josh and I don't make a penny on any of these. None of these are affiliate links. We're just
Mhm.
sharing information. Bubble's a good platform, but no, it's not. I'm not saying it's the best, Josh. I don't think you're going to say it's the best. It's a good one, but it's really what you guys want to do there. So
Yeah.
Brian asked a really good question, and
Mhm.
I think this is a good one to deal with. So Brian asked, and Brian, sorry it took us a minute to get to this, but if you want to hire someone to create a custom GPT outside of Chat GPT, are there any qualifications we should look for? And what I like best about this, Brian, are there any red flags? I want to jump in on the red flag real quick, Josh, and then I'll
Yep.
let you answer the rest of it.
Fire away.
Is you don't go post in any Facebook group, that includes my group, and ask for somebody to tell you if they can help you, because that's a big red flag. If you want to hire somebody to do this, my recommendation is book a call through Quantum Path Innovations. They do that. They can help out with that. They're a sponsor of this. They're great. Or go out to Upwork and find somebody on Upwork that has got experience and can demonstrate and show you, just like Josh showed you some of the custom GPTs they've built, that they can show you that. If somebody's reaching out to you without you asking them and telling you how they can build a custom GPT, I can tell you guys that's a huge red flag. We see people in my group all the time offering to do stuff. Don't, if you didn't ask them, assume the answer is no. So, Josh,
Mhm.
that's my thoughts. How would you answer Brian on this?
I would say the same thing. There's a couple interesting things though. I think the people because if you want to be able to demonstrate the experience, not just based on building the custom GPT, because that could be one of these bots that we're talking about in the assistance, right? That could be one of those things. If you're looking for it to be outside of that ecosystem, then that's what they need to show you is that working outside of the ecosystem. The challenge I would tell you with that is that because people that are good at conning people will find ways to say, like, let's show you this. I didn't do it, but let's show you this. It looks awesome and it looks good. That would be the only thing. And I like that's a great question. I've never actually thought about, hey, this is what you need to do in order to make sure from a skill set standpoint, because we're in the infancy of all of this stuff. So it's like I would say, like, oh, people who have degrees or people who do this. And it's like nobody has degrees in any of this stuff, right?
I was just thinking, anybody
Everything's
who's a
self-taught.
self-proclaimed expert, be wary.
Mhm.
The more they tell you how good they are at stuff, the more you
Mhm.
should think about running away.
Well, and I think the challenge is that there is a obviously you need to see the work that can be done. Most of these things, I think the questions that they ask is probably the thing that you need to be watching out for the most. It's like if they're asking questions about how you communicate, what I want you to take a step back and we all think that this stuff is awesome. Like I thought for a long time, I thought it was funny that marketers are excited because it'll create blog posts, right? That's literally like if I had to pick out what AI and automation type work can do, it's like it's one of the little teeny tiniest things of as far as the doors, that it can swing, right? It's so much more valuable than that. But we like the technical side of things. But what this really comes down to is the people that can make these things work the best are one of two things. One, they are better communicators, right? If you're a very good, succinct communicator, your stuff is going to work way better than anybody else's stuff. So
Mhm.
the questions that they are asking is a very important piece to the puzzle, right? The technical side, truthfully, technical side, everything's self-taught, right? Everything's self-taught. I
Yeah.
would ask them questions like, "Hey, where did you learn what you learned?" Do not worry about if they say, "I learned this in college," or "I learned this there." You want specific courses, you want specific videos, you want not that you want to go look at them or do anything with it, but it's like, listen, again, this stuff moves too fast. The open source community with all of these things I'll tell you firsthand. Go to GitHub and then start looking through that stuff. That's where I've done most of my stuff, right? Whenever we're trying to get in and learn how to do these things. Because one, there's a huge community of people that are technicians and nerdy and geeky like me. Like, I don't know if you can see Yoda right back there, but that's all you need to know whenever it comes down to, knowing what type of person that I am. You're going to be wanting to ask questions about that. How did you learn what you know? And if
No,
it
that's a
comes
good point.
down, right? Because that's the only way that you can judge it. And if they're slow to tell you, that's the only way that I can tell you that you could judge it by. Because if they're just like searching, well, where did I learn it? Whatever. Like, listen, you want to trust people who said, I've learned that I'm self-taught on this. I've been through the hundreds and thousands of hours of YouTube videos. I work on open source platforms over here. Look for those types of answers, because there's two things that you want to know of. If they run into a problem, which with AI and all this stuff is changing, they will, don't care what it is, they'll run into a problem. You want them to know how to go fix it or how to find an answer that your project can stay on path. I think that in a projects like this, when you're building tech or you're building solutions like this, they need to know how to problem solve. And that's probably the biggest thing. Now, I'm going to tell you that if anybody says it's going to be a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it might happen. Like, I wouldn't necessarily build something that is timeline sensitive that's more than like 3 weeks out, because it could be fine tuning, it could be getting it in exactly what you want to. I know most of these simple things for businesses, it's going to take 10 to 14 days for the most part. But even if it stretches out a little bit on that side, you want people to be able to say, listen, if they say, I don't know, in this case, that's a good answer because they're being honest with you,
Well, the other thing I
right?
want to remind your people here, and this may be not popular, especially if we've got any academics in the group, and I apologize, but if they have a certification from a university, run. Okay, because in today's date, right now, the universities are not up to par to get those certifications out in a timely manner. I sit on the board for a university that's doing this, guys. I'll give you an example. They approached me last November. They finally got the paperwork for me to sign in January, and they have yet to show me the course that they're doing, other than what they showed me back in November or October timeframe. Josh, a course that was done, a certification done in October, how valuable is that today in April?
It's not,
Not in the
there's,
AI world, guys.
you've got fundamentals. So here's the thing. And again, as shameless plug for Jonathan's mastery course on AI prompting, that is the only foundational skill set that you need to have in order to make any of this stuff works, because you need to be able to, like with prompting, what you're actually doing is programming a computer with natural language. So the better communicator you are, the better off that you'll be and the better outputs that you have. So the more human you are, the better AI outputs you get. It sounds kind of silly, right? Whenever you look at it that way, but that's exactly what it is. So if you're not for sure about how to go through and do these things, that is probably the first starting point beyond anything that you're doing. Like, so chat GPTs are sexy and cool and all that stuff. But if you don't know what it is to program the system using prompting and natural things and how to test and refine that process, no matter what you do in the future, no matter what you insert into your business. Now, people like me and people like Jonathan, we understand that part of it. So when people come in and say, okay, how do we do this? Cool, we'll tell you how to do it. And then they say, we don't, like, you get into it and you don't want to do it. Like, we study that stuff. And unfortunately, every 6 months or less, well, like, it's a revamp. So I'll just give you an example. Like, I'm usually on a quarterly basis, I'm in 1 to 2 of these larger AI conferences and language learning model type conferences, getting into the nitty-gritty because I need to see what's happening coming forward. And I'll be frank, there's things that are happening right now that in January I said would be impossible when we're 5 years out. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know if
things
you
are
guys have
changing
seen,
that fast. Yeah, it's
if you've
that's a
seen
very good point.
Sora, if you've seen Sora for video, like surely everybody's seen that. And if you haven't, go look up OpenAI Sora model. It has some sample videos on the page, all AI. I sent Jonathan some stuff last night on a music app called Suno.ai.
Yep.
It makes
So
full songs, lyrics, everything. Like,
good
never
songs.
like songs you would, if I didn't tell you, you would not know that they weren't on the radio or that somebody professionally hadn't done it. So the thing is that the creative iterations are happening so fast. Now that's just on the creative side. Now, I think where everybody needs to keep in mind here, and I know that we're talking about GPTs and things, but from a broader context, You need to know fundamentally prompting, and you need to know fundamentally how to direct.
Yeah.
Because how AI is going to go, you guys become creative directors in your stories and the things that you do. And there's going to be AI pilots that do everything. Like one person for an ad department instead of 8 or 9 people for an ad department is what's coming. But these GPTs are all part of that because you're saying, okay, how do we make all of these things work? So being a better communicator, prompting is was your foundational thing. So getting back into education on that side of things, like that's probably the other thing that I would ask people for. Like, okay, from a prompting standpoint, can you give me an example of some of the prompts that you've used in the past? And if they're one shot prompts or if they're there's multiple thought processes on that. But if they're not fundamentally sound, it's going to like you could probably tell really fast whether or not somebody was worth their salt because they've iterated and they've stayed up with the best practices.
Good stuff. So we've got one other question here. We've got a number, but one I want to make sure we do as we're running near the end of time here. We just had a great question come in from Eric about can you do a quick recap of starting your own GPT outside of API? So we've decided we want to do it. Maybe, what are the quick recap, not a lot of detail, but kind of bullet points. What should we be looking at in order to create that custom GPT outside of the ecosystem of ChatGPT?
Okay. So step number one, you've got to decide the engine, right? That could be OpenAI, that could be Claude or Anthropic, that could be Gemini, but you need to decide that, get an account set up for your API keys. If you need to fund it for the usage, fine, go ahead and do that. But that's the first step that you need to look through and do. If you want to build something right now that's easy, if you've got a Chat GPT Plus account, start there. Build out an assistant, okay, and start the process there. What we're going to do is we're going to take that. So once you have that piece done, then you're going to go into a couple different spots. Okay. One, you can use uh, a wrapper like CustomGPT.ai. You can get signed up for pubbot.co, or if you let me know, we'll help you get hooked up on something like that. So that's pulling that stuff in, or going to Bubble and building the application, right? Again, there are YouTube videos out there where you can do that kind of stuff. Some of them are 20, 30 minutes long. If you've got a web dev background or anything like that, you might be able to be just fine with it. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, if you don't want to do that and you just want to have it outside, then go to po.com and then you can just create your bots right from there. Right. So
Excellent. Excellent.
those are the two ways if you're going to do it the quickest and to be able to start using other things outside of the open AI framework.
Great stuff, Josh. Great stuff. A great adder. Guys, I want to thank you. We've got literally about 3 minutes left. If you've got one more quick question, we'll be happy to try to answer that. As a reminder, yes, a couple questions that came up. We did talk about some ways you can monetize in general. If you've got specific questions about how to monetize that and stuff, I want to encourage you to go visit our sponsor at quantumpathinnovations.com. Shameless plug for them. They'll get you on their waiting list for their mastermind. We can also book time to talk to Josh and myself about that. And we'd be happy to hop on a call and explain that in more detail. Also, if you guys have other things that you'd like us to train on, if you want us to do a deep dive into how do you monetize one of these, let us know. And then Josh and I will be happy to schedule some of these. We're more than happy to give away knowledge and do that. Would love to have that information available to you guys. We just want to know what you want so that we can make sure we're addressing that appropriately. So if you got any other questions, let us know. Again, I want to give a plug. Josh has been great about plugging me, and I'm thankful for that. Josh and I have known each other now for a couple of years and have worked together on a ton of different projects in a ton of different areas. If you're looking for somebody that really gets the back end of this, that's not me. Like Josh said, I'm a prompting guy. I get prompting. I'm not the back end guy. Josh knows this stuff really well. And if you want to get on a call with him, again, just go to quantuminnovations.com or pathinnovations.com, get on the wait list. You can get connected with Josh. I can message me if you want. Go on Facebook, Josh Wheeler. There aren't a ton of them out there. And there's only some that have the great beard that Josh does. So it's really easy to find him. And we can do that. And we can make sure you guys get connected. I really do mention that. So a good
Perfect.
question just came in by LD. He asked, do you need to have a computer coding or web development experience to do this?
Nope.
No, you don't. Even a dummy marketing guy like me could, But Josh, can you tell a little bit more about that? Do you need that coding or web dev experience to do this?
No, it makes it a little easier as you're trying to go through and learn. So, like for me, I like to build a bubble. It's a no code platform. So if you've ever built like a WYSIWYG website, what you see is what you get when you pull an element over and you can kind of place it wherever it is that you want. And then you have to put the parameters in. So it's like you click it, preferences, and basically say, okay, this is what we want you to do here. Like it doesn't need web dev work, but it's familiar, or I would say it's more familiar for people that have done stuff in Divi or WordPress or anything like that. But when you're talking about sitting down and actually punching down HTML code or CSS or JavaScript or any of that stuff, no, you don't have to do any of that stuff. If you want to expand your skill set, Python is actually the next scripting part that I would actually put in place because you can automate some other things outside of that. But you don't need any of that stuff whatsoever. It'll be a little bit of a learning curve in terms of just getting familiar with where it is. But of course, every tool is like that. So
Absolutely. Well, Josh, I want to
similar to
thank you.
Wix. Yeah, sorry, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's a
similar to
good.
Wix.
Yeah, good thing, Brian. Thanks for that. That's a really good point. Yeah, it is similar to Wix. Well, Josh, I want to thank you for your time, especially for spending the extra half hour with us on the call. And I want to thank everybody. We've had just an amazing stickiness of you guys sticking with us. I assume that means you like the content. We're grateful again. As we're shutting down, again, just a reminder, if this was valuable to you, I'd love to see number ones in the, just to let Josh and I know that this has been valuable. I'd also love comments after the fact. If you're catching the replay, let us know what other things you'd like us to talk about related to custom GPTs. I believe that custom GPTs are the future of AI as we train them on our data and use them. But I believe the future revolves around not having that reliant on one ecosystem, but being reliant and the ability to connect to multiple engines to do that, and the ability to switch in and out. Imagine, just for example, imagine that ChatGPT was best for certain questions and Claude was best for another set, and Google, believe it or not, was actually best for something else. We could actually program your custom GPT to ask certain questions to different models to get the best possible answers, allowing you ultimately to deliver the most value to your clients. So, guys, we thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you. Really appreciate the comments. That means a ton. Josh and I put a lot of work into prepping these, and we're happy to do it, but it's always good to get a little love back. So thank you so much. Again, as a reminder, the replay will be out and you'll be able to see that. And if you're interested in learning more and want to learn how to do this, want more information, again, if you would support our sponsor, we'd be grateful. You can learn more about them at quantumpathinnovations.com, quantumpathinnovations.com. With that, everybody, make it a great day. We will see you soon. And don't forget to watch both Josh and I for more courses and master classes like this coming up. Have a great day, everybody.